There is, in Oxford University, in Oxford, England, there's a seminary called Wycliffe Hall, and Dr. Lloyd is the principal, meaning he's the dean, the head of that seminary. And he's coming to visit churches in Texas and see what's going on in the Episcopal Church in the Diocese of Texas. So he's spending a good bit of time in Houston, but he also wanted to see what else is going on in the diocese. Said, you should go see what's going on in Waco. So he'll be here next Wednesday evening. He'll be our speaker. He is unbelievably educated, as one would be to be dean at Oxford, but he's also very down to earth. And he will be talking to us about 3 boats, 2 natures, and a hovercraft. And you'll be even able to see the slides when I put it on the screen. Thank you. Thank you. Please just holler at me anytime. If a text comes up, don't read it. Okay. There we go. Okay. The Reverend Dr. Michael Lloyd. There he is. Thank you. Please hold your applause. 3 boats, 2 natures, and a hovercraft. And so do come back next week. And if you know anybody who's interested in hearing from a really wonderful theologian and speaker, next week would be a great chance. Not tonight. The week after that, we're taking a break from our regularly scheduled Lenten offerings to have Bishop Andy Doyle. There are 4 bishops in Texas. Andy is the big bishop, and he is going to be visiting 8 congregations around the diocese for people to just have a chance to hear from him, the vision for the next 5 years, to ask questions, to whatever annoying things about how St. Alban's is run, you can bring those to him. He would love to hear that. No, kidding. So that's next week. There is a QR code on your table. If you can RSVP for that, that is really helpful because the diocese is buying food. So if you want to let us know if you're coming, that's helpful. There is nursery care provided, both for kind of the little folks in the nursery, and then for the slightly older kids in the godly tots room. That's next week, and you can RSVP. Bishop Doyle had a new image created. This was the first one, and Bishop Doyle said, I don't drive a van, but he does drive a huge red Jeep, so he had them do the graphic over again. One final just housekeeping. If you're a member here, this is for you. If you're not, don't worry about it. There's always a little dip in giving in the beginning of the year as people sort of get over the Christmas thing and the credit card shock when that first statement comes and all that. And I just let you know that we had 71% of what was budgeted to come in for the first 2 months. So that 30% that didn't come in means that Nancy is not sleeping well, our business manager. And so I implore you, by the bowels of Christ and for the sake of Nancy, if you've made a pledge, to just stay current on that. She'll be sending statements out in April, so if you want to know where you are, you can wait till that comes, or you can give her a call and she'll let you know. All right, now on to the talk. To generate interest, I decided to use some of the best tactics on the internet. Have you seen when you're at just a regular site, just a normal news site, or just Facebook, the mouth of hell, and you'll see these ads show up that always have somebody doing something like this. And they'll say something like, my favorite is, lose belly fat with this one weird trick. How do they know me so well? One of the things they always say, there's a shocking fact, or you'll never believe. So you'll never believe this shocking fact about Jesus' mitochondria. So that's what I actually want to talk about tonight. And just to clear this up, I'm not talking about midichlorians. Neal asked. So who knows, Neal, would you like to tell us what a midichlorian is? Okay. Any nerds? Calling any nerds here who would like to reveal their nerd status? It's a start, yes. So the thing that makes you have a lot of the force. I find your lack of faith disturbing, Colton Gillenwater. Yeah. So the way you have a lot of the force is by having a lot of midichlorians in you, which they never really explain what those are. Anyways, mitochondria are things you actually have in every single cell in your body. And we'll come back to mitochondria in a little bit. But first, there is a hilarious scene in a show I don't recommend or endorse, called Family Guy, which has run forever. It's an animated sitcom. It's the kind of thing that your kids might stop if they're flipping channels because it's a cartoon, but then if you walk in, you'd say, oh, no, you're not. The main character, Peter Griffin, in this episode, what's happening here is that he's just learned that Jesus is Jewish. Clearly, it's around Easter time. And he's shocked to learn that Jesus is Jewish. Now, hopefully, you already were aware of that fact. But I want to tell you something else shocking, which you are also probably aware of, but you may not spend that much time thinking about, which is that Jesus is human. And I don't say Jesus was human, although that is true. But as we say in the Creed every Sunday at St. Alban's, and thousands of churches of all denominations around the world, that Jesus Christ rose from the dead on the third day, and he ascended into heaven, where he sitteth on the right hand of the Father. So that means he ascended bodily into heaven. Scars and all, belly button and all. He ascended bodily. So Jesus, when you're praying to our Lord Jesus Christ, you're talking to a human. He didn't stop being human. That's one of the key things the scripture wants to make clear. He rises from the dead, and within the sight of the disciples, he doesn't sort of like they go to check his hotel room the next morning and he's gone. He didn't want them to see the resurrection. Nobody was there to see that. They found him later by the tomb. The tomb was already empty, but he wanted them to see him ascend with his body into heaven. So Jesus is human. And that's something that we might not think about that much, because we're very much into Jesus being God, which he also is. And those are two difficult things to hold in your head at the same time. And so we tend to fall off on one side or the other. And which side you fall off on that's how you get the answer to that cosmopolitan quiz. Which kind of heretic are you? If you're more on the Jesus is human side and just sort of pretending to be God, or whether Jesus was more on the God side, just pretending to be human. There's whole heretical movements built around those things. This Lenten series is called Jesus Human, and it is about the incarnation, which may have struck you as odd. The incarnation is what we normally talk about at Christmas, Jesus being born as a little baby, becoming human. But during the season of Lent, we talk about suffering. It's one of the focuses of this time. And it's not because we're morbid, down people, but it's because I don't know anybody who's not suffering. And any church that doesn't talk about suffering is going to miss vast swaths of humanity and human life, and ultimately fail to connect. And so if your church is one that never talks about, not your church, but if a church doesn't talk about suffering, at some point you will feel massively disconnected from it and probably start looking around, or just more likely not go anymore, which is a really popular option these days. Every survey is never like, and the church is exploding. It's always like another year, fewer people are going. So Lent is a time when we talk about suffering because we're all going through it. And it's every Sunday. There's 5 Sundays in Lent. We begin with Jesus suffering, hungry and thirsty in the desert because he hasn't eaten anything for 40 days. Second Sunday, there's somebody named Herod threatening to kill Jesus. That's suffering. And we hear from Jesus that nobody listens to anything he says. He's like your mom. And then we hear on Lent 3, Jesus talking about other people who suffered an untimely death. One group of people from state violence, another group of people from engineering mishap of a public works project in Siloam. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just read the readings from last Sunday. Then we have on Lent 4, the prodigal son, which that story, the 2 lost sons, the younger one, the older one, that's suffering of people making bad choices, suffering through loss, through having estranged children, suffering through public shame. Lots of hurt people there. And then we, of course, get to the final Sunday in this extravaganza of suffering, Lent 5. Jesus is at the home of his friends, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And Mary anoints Jesus' feet with this very expensive perfumed oil. She wipes his feet with her hair, which always struck me as a little weird, but culture context is everything. But what is interesting about what she's doing there is she's preparing Jesus for burial, as she says. So there's suffering, leaning into that. And it goes without saying that suffering is always bodily. We've had our TV screens or your smartphone screens filled with images of suffering from Ukraine and the surrounding countries. And you see a lot of bodily suffering. But even a child who has lost her parents due to an airstrike with no wounds is also suffering bodily, because grief is bodily. You cannot have feelings without your synapses, your neurons, your hormones, all those things going on with these tiny glands at the back of your brain that release all kinds of cortisol and adrenaline and all kinds of things that make you have certain feelings, without the electrons traveling back and forth on these tiny little threads between the cells of your brain. That's all bodily. So even that sort of just mental suffering is bodily suffering. So this season of Lent is when we talk about all these things. And we talk about suffering. We talk about the humanity of Jesus in his suffering. And again, this all means the thing that I'm just kind of hitting on over and over with suffering being bodily is that with Jesus' humanity, he suffered in his body for real. And this is the thing that I just invite you, this is sort of an extended meditation on what it might mean to really just take some time and contemplate that Jesus had a body. Almost everybody I visit in pastoral care, and this is true for Al and for Neal, and if any of you that do pastoral care as lay people, or if you work in the medical professions, or the caring and helping professions, and as I said, even if that's a mental health professional, you are caring for people for whom their bodies are not doing what they wish they would. Some of this is natural just with aging. I don't recover as quickly. I know I look 35, but I'm 75 years old. No, I'm not. It's a combination of Botox and having one Mexican parent. I look a lot younger than I am. But when I got to St. Albans my first Sunday, people were like, "Who's the new acolyte?" That was 8 years ago, so I don't know if I can pull that off anymore. But yeah, I mean, is anybody who's basically past the age of 18 starts to figure out, or maybe 25, but your body starts to not recover as you don't bounce back, and you need more sleep, and then the other things start to happen, and there's tests you need when you turn 50, and all these things, and you maybe used to take an occasional vitamin C, and then you got one medication, and then it was 2 medications, and then you are in the part of CVS where they sell, I always used to wonder who bought these things, the pill containers that have days of the week. And I'm on the starter pack right now. It's got small little compartments, but they're about a gallon each. It's like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I know that's where I'm headed. So your body is this source of suffering, and I think you can't live your life without a body. The first thing you thought when you woke up this morning, one of the first things at least, was, why am I hurting? And your first sensations were physical ones, light coming through the window and hitting the back of your eyeball. Those photons were doing things to your little retina back there, cones and rods firing signals in your brain. You notice the feeling of the pillow or how cold the floor was when you put your feet out. You're just existing bodily all the time. And my point is Jesus had all of that. Jesus had fingerprints. No one has had a pair like he had before or since. Jesus knew what it was like to have your leg fall asleep and to sneeze. Jesus knew what puberty was like because he went through it. Anybody ever think about that, about what that was like? There is another Family Guy scene where teenage Jesus is telling Joseph, "You're not my real dad." We don't talk a lot about Jesus going to the bathroom, but he did. He absolutely did. Jesus had dreams. I mean, not like a vision for his life. I mean, he just would wake up and be like, "Mom, I had the weirdest dream last night." He got seeds stuck in his teeth. He knew what it was like to burn the roof of your mouth on something that was too hot and to bite your tongue and have it start to swell, and so you bite it again and it hurts even worse. He knew all. This is the radical and unique thing that Christians believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, scholars of religion, but I don't know of another system of belief that has tried to put forward this idea that the central figure in their worship is both fully divine, with no minimization of the godness, and fully human, with no reduction in the humanity. It doesn't work mathematically. It's 100% plus 100% equals 100%. It's not 50-50. It's not 100 plus 100 equals 200. It's Jesus is one thing, and he is fully God and he is fully man at the same time, and neither one are compromised or limited in any way. Other religions have prophets, which are humans who have some sort of divine connection or spark. And if you're a Swedenborgian or something like that, you believe human beings are like that too. Other religions have Loki. No offense to my Nordic brothers and sisters. Loki is a god who can look like a human, but he's not human. Jesus comes here with this idea that he is fully God and fully man. One of the early ways people tried to present this when they tried to represent Jesus, which even doing that was crazy. Jews never drew God. Muslims don't draw God, and they don't even draw their prophet. If you go to a mosque, all the decoration is calligraphy and geometric patterns. It's even too much to do. If you go to Jewish houses of worship, you might see a pomegranate or some leaf, some plant that comes from the natural world. Not in Islamic art. They're just even so careful. Christians early on start drawing Jesus, which is bananas, but the reason they did it is because apparently God must be okay with it because God became human and is okay with being seen. And so they try to represent that divinity and humanity, and you see like his eyes are kind of jacked. Like one is different than the other. One is bigger and like not quite looking at you. This is a way of saying he's two things at the same time. So Christianity tries to do this, and it's deeply offensive. It was deeply offensive when he did it. Jewish people around him, this is why they always wanted to kill him, because he claimed to be God. Wanted to pick up rocks and bash his head in. It's still offensive to people today. It can be seen as demeaning. And now, so I'm going to turn now. This is dinner and discussion. So there's a little bit of discussion time now. So I'm going to ask you to introverts, I apologize in advance. If you need to suddenly go to the bathroom, that's fine. Like leave. Have a coughing fit. Just manufacture some sort of crisis. Check your phone and look surprised and head for the doors. But what I ask you to do is just turn in your tables, and if you're alone like Neal, join a table. And here's the question I want you to discuss. What's easier for you, thinking of Jesus as God or as human? Now, make some noise with those chairs. All right, wrap it up. I know it's just getting good. Wrap it up. So, at the table I joined, there were some people that were more on the Jesus seems more like God, and some people Jesus is more human. And I just wanted to show you, I want everybody to leave offended. So, this is a clip. Actually, I couldn't bring myself to show you the video. It's a song by a group called Susto, and the song is called Chillin' on the Beach with My Best Friend Jesus Christ. And the lyrics are perfectly respectable. The video shows a tent revival that turns into a keg party when Jesus shows up. And so there's a lot of things that I felt like might be beyond the pale. You never know who's going to come to something that's open to this, like an open event like this. And there could be, if you grew up in the Pentecostal tradition, as some of us have, it might be a little much. So I'm not showing the video, but I will play you just a clip of the song. Let's see if we can hear it. Robert's at the ready with the remotes. We've been traveling all around Japan, and we found this part is random. What I like to hear the most are those old-time hymns. We're going to play one for you now, one called Chillin' on the Beach with My Best Friend, Jesus Christ. Who's heard this before? Anyone? One. Abigail Zimmerman. Good theology. Drink a Bud Light. Okay, in case you didn't hear that, chilling on the beach with my best friend Jesus Christ, drink a Bud Light, going out for beers with my best friend, but not too many beers with my best friend Jesus Christ. Now, I bet that there's part of your brain that's like, yeah, I know he was called the friend of sinners, and he was called a glutton and a drunkard, and he turned water into wine, but that's not right. Like, that's sort of like, it feels a little, and, but I'm sorry, but Jesus is a human. And he went to parties. And he clearly participated. And I'm not saying, and yes, I affirm the sinless nature of Jesus Christ. But I think we've turned Jesus too much into Dana Carvey on SNL as the church lady than into who he actually was as a human. It was one of the table conversation we had, if I can share, there was a conversation about a TV show that portrayed Jesus in modern day settings, and this person said that it was odd to see Jesus joking, because Jesus is always serious. We know in life he wasn't. He was hilarious, but we don't often think of that. So just as we continue to move through how Jesus becoming human has invited people to imagine what it would be like to have him actually around, here's another little clip. Let's see.
Okay, everybody, for my next miracle, I'm going to turn water into funk.
Okay.
Okay, everybody.
Next one.
Okay, everybody, I know you were expecting something else, but as science will tell you, people were a lot shorter 2,000 years ago. So let's try to be adult about this. No snickering, and hey, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so if we can all be mature, give me the gum, we can all get through this a lot faster.
So my next question is, what's the hardest thing for you as you think about the humanity of Jesus? And I think for many of us, it's just that he's human. All those things, playing games, joking, turning wine into funk, that's a better metaphor for what happened at the wedding at Cana in Galilee than the way we normally tell that story. Jesus turned a good party into a great one. And if we get the sense of that by showing people in big wigs and platform boots, then that's helpful. So, did anybody feel an internal resistance in watching those clips? Just like, is that allowed? Anyone want to talk about that? Jesus didn't get drunk. And I said, I affirm his sinlessness, and none of those clips showed that. Yes. Yeah, Stephanie was not allowed to watch Family Guy. I think it's interesting that this show, which again I do not endorse and recommend in any way, and Seth MacFarlane, the creator of the show, is exploring the humanity of Jesus, I think in some ways, with more courage than most Christians ever do, because we put Jesus in a little museum case, and we don't let him come out. There's a famous appearance of Jesus as an infant in Prague, Czechoslovakia. You know, like Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of Fatima, the Virgin Mary is reputed to have appeared in these places, Our Lady of Guatemala. And the infant Christ showed up in Prague in the teaching of the church in that place. And in wearing if you've ever seen, you can Google the infant of Prague and you'll see sort of a toddler wearing what look like elaborate drapes and an enormous crown, just very fancy silk, brocade, all this stuff. And the joke is like, what did the Blessed Virgin Mary say to the infant of Prague when he wanted to go out and play? Not in that dress, you won't. And we kind of keep Jesus as this, like, keep him pristine, even though we know about his suffering, even though we know about his humanity, we know about all those things. And the thing is, maybe the golf thing was a little sinful. He was cheating a little bit, but there was no sin in those other two clips. And so, but it's just, it makes Jesus too human. It makes him too real, and we'd much rather him be on a pedestal, just sort of glowing, floating. And the thing about him being short, I think that's hilarious, because he absolutely was shorter than every adult in this room. Like, if you look at the archaeological evidence of human beings in the first century, they were not big people. Americans, you are already huger. Go anywhere. You'll be towering over everybody, except like Northern Europe. You're nodding because you've been there. And you're like, what's up? I mean, I'm not tall. I go to Mexico. I'm like, what's up, people? My whole family is like, here. This is the tall one. So, but we have a hard time imagining ourselves taller than Jesus. But you were. Again, because we have this sort of block to his humanity. All right, this is what I want to talk about, and we'll wrap up and have you questions. I've spent a lot of time introductory, and this is maybe stuff you've kind of thought of before. Just maybe you took a second to think about Jesus' humanity. Maybe it came, it was preached about in a sermon, or, you know that Jesus is human. This is not a surprise to you, and maybe you've thought about it a little bit more. But the final thing I want to talk about, which is the whole mitochondria thing, I want to talk about the significance of the fact that Jesus had cells and organelles and a nervous system and tendons. And in every cell in his body was this countless numbers of these mitochondria, each one containing a molecule called adenosine triphosphate that was able to take the sugar that his body had broken down from whatever he ate that day and the oxygen that he was breathing and burn it in a controlled reaction so that the energy was released that could power his muscles and his brain, but in a way that it didn't get too hot that he burned up. Because that's what your body is doing all the time. It's burning sugar to fuel every thought you have and every motion you make, every breath you take. I'll be watching you. Your body is a furnace all the time. And Jesus had these mitochondria doing this work all the time. Mitochondria has DNA that's different from the DNA that codes your personality, your appearance. You have DNA. We took Phil's skin cells and scraped them off his cheek. We spin it in the centrifuge, we could sequence his DNA. And that DNA is different from the DNA in all the mitochondria in his body. And you get it from your mom. And there's some people that think that points to a single female ancestor of the human race. I don't know where people would get that idea. That was a church joke. Thank you, Neal. Mitochondria. Jesus had them. And what I'm getting at is to think beneath the skin of Jesus Christ, Yeshua. By the way, was anybody offended by the fact that they kept calling Jesus, Jesus? Like it's just weird to say his name, like as a person? That's how all his friends would have talked to him. But again, we get nervous about that. Anyways, Jesus, Yeshua, I want to go even smaller. Mitochondria, you can't see them. That's what they look like under a microscope. Adenosine triphosphate. I want to go smaller. I want to get down to subatomic particles, and I want to get down to electrons, and I want to get down to the small and large forces that are holding the nucleus of those atoms together. And all I want to point out by saying this is that in his human body, Jesus Christ had building blocks of the universe. We know that matter is neither created nor destroyed. Every atom in your body, every carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, potassium atom in your body used to be part of something else. It used to be part of trees and dogs and stars. And that was true for Jesus Christ. And one of the wonderful things when you begin to meditate and ruminate on the incarnation of Christ, and if you think for 5 seconds about something you heard in your high school science class, this is Bert Hollifield for me, my science teacher in 10th grade. And what becomes apparent is that in his death and resurrection and ascension into heaven, bodily as a human being, Jesus not only redeems humans, but he redeems the cosmos. He redeems all of creation. And then in a way that I don't know how to explain or understand, there are pieces of stars and quasars and dogs and palm trees in the presence of God the Father, in the Godhead, in the Trinity. So for what that means for you and for me, Jesus in his body knows what it's like to be human. He's with us in our suffering. He is someone who doesn't know about it, but he knows it. Jesus also, in his death and resurrection and ascension, has redeemed all things. And I don't know about you, but it is pretty clear to me that it's not just that human beings need redemption. The whole cosmos needs redemption. If you've known anybody die from what is called an act of God, if you've known anyone who's had a terminal disease, if you've seen what societies can do to each other, we need to redeem everything. Nations don't exist. Let me say that again. Nations don't actually exist. No prehistoric megafauna was walking around Russia, no giant bear 40,000 years ago, and it was like, oh, now I'm in Ukraine. Didn't exist. They don't exist. We make them up and we all believe them, so they kind of exist that way, but they don't actually exist. And yet human beings find ways to make up things that don't exist and then kill each other for it. We do it all the time. The whole creation needs redemption. Everything. Down to the tiniest subatomic particle. And that's, to me, one of the good things about Jesus being fully human and fully God. The creation is good. Bodies are good. Matter is good. But there seems to be a fly in the ointment, and the whole thing needs to be redeemed. And that's what the incarnation of Christ points us to, one of the things it points us to. That's all I want to say tonight. Deep thoughts with Jack Handy. But I do want to pause. If I've triggered any deep thoughts for you, where does this take you? What does this make you think of? What are you questioning? I know it's kind of heavy. It's kind of a lot. It's kind of deep. There was science. I know. I apologize. Where is this landing for you? Or what questions do you have?
Always strikes me weird. Why did God have to kill God
Ha!
to redeem us? Why would he kill himself? Could there have been another way?
That's a great question. So Alan asked a super easy softball question that I'll repeat for the rest of you. Why did God have to kill God? Why did God have to kill himself? And I would say there's no easy pat answer to that. But I would point in the direction of the fact that sometimes, and I don't know if this is true for you, Alan, sometimes when people ask that question, what they're thinking is that God set up the world and everything was great, and then humans messed it up, and God was like, oh, crud. Now I got to go to plan B and send Jesus to die on the cross. What the scriptures tell us, the New Testament, Jesus Christ died before the foundations of the world. We experience Jesus as human beings in time, somewhere around 4 BC. He wasn't born in 0. The monk got it a little wrong. Somewhere around 4 BC, Jesus is born. Somewhere in around 30 AD, Jesus dies. And what we don't realize is that the crucified and risen, scarred Jesus has always been in the Trinity. It's not like there's a pre-Jesus Trinity and after Jesus Trinity. The death and resurrection of Jesus Christ has always been in the Godhead. Taking in and redeeming the suffering of humanity has always been part of who God is. God has to reveal that over time in the stories that we read in the scriptures. We see a suffering, humble God who takes on the pain of his people in the Hebrew scriptures, in the Old Testament, in all kinds of ways. But then it comes really clear to the fore in Jesus Christ. So that's one of the ways I would answer that question. Which was not really the topic of tonight, but it's fine. No, it's a great question. No, I'm kidding. I'm teasing you, Alan. I'm teasing. Yeah, I mean, if you can't ask theological questions in church, what's the point? What else? What else is hitting you? Now I feel bad, Alan. I hope I didn't make you feel bad. Okay. I love you. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, no. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, so Anna's point was that even though the majority of the material that made up Jesus rose with him in the ascension, he did spend 30 odd years before that shedding skin cells, losing teeth, hair, defecating. I mean, yes, and again, if that's uncomfortable, we need to spend some more time thinking about the humanity of Jesus because he did that every day. And God invented that for you. So, if you have a problem with it, take it up with him. His matter is all over the world. Yeah, I mean, it's It's around. It's getting recycled in all things. So it's a very real and wonderful thing to talk about Jesus being present in that way still today. Absolutely. It's very, yeah, next time you see a redwood. I mean, and after this, we're having a drum circle outside. Yes, Tommy Moat.
So even though all dogs probably know what it has, maybe one part, some part of a dog.
Because of the part that was in Jesus. Right, yeah, sure. I do, so actually I'll take your wonderful, playful question and make a serious question about it that I get actually asked all the time. Adults think this, but they don't feel they're allowed to ask it, but kids do ask it all the time. What happens to my pet when he or she dies? Do dogs go to heaven? And this is the other good thing about Jesus redeeming the whole cosmos, is that your dog, your cat, your hamster, your hedgehog, your parakeet, your goldfish, all of that is redeemed. All of that is wrapped up into the embracing, redeeming love of Christ. And this also begins to point to how Christians understand heaven, which is not some cloud land where Lando Calrissian is waiting to welcome us. Billy D. Williams coming to Waco very soon with the symphony. The Christian understanding of heaven is, as the Bible says, a new heaven and a new earth. And the old pass away and a new thing, and whole new creation gets made. And Jesus is the first part of that. And it's physical, and it's real, and it's material. And so that's a topic for next year's Lenten series or something like that. Yes, Janine. And this will be our last question. Yeah. So Janine's question is a great question. You observed that in the scriptures, we don't see as much of the humanity of Jesus that we would say we were reading a modern biography of Winston Churchill. We are going to hear that he was born in Blenheim Palace in the coat room because his mom was there for a party and she was pregnant and went into labor. You're going to hear that he invented tracksuits, custom tracksuits, absolutely true. You're going to hear that he drank scotch for breakfast. You're going to hear about his childhood. You're going to hear about the South Africa period and all these things. And in his whole life, that's how we write biographies today. Because the prime question that a biographer is often trying to answer is, give me a timeline of this person's life and show me what made him or her tick. What made Winston Churchill the great person he is? What made Marie Curie the great scientist she was? In Greco-Roman biography, the question that the biographer was trying to answer was different. So if you get into the genre of writing at this time, you didn't write to get a chronological account of the person's life. You didn't write a biography to understand what made them tick. You wrote a biography to show the meaning of his or her life and why you should follow this person, why they were great. And so if a birth narrative is included, it's only included so that you will maybe see this person as a special person and some hints given in that birth narrative of what that person is special about. So that's why Mark doesn't give you a birth narrative. John doesn't give you a birth narrative. It's only Matthew. Really, Luke is the one that gives you the long one. And it's to show you that he's a king. You get one story of him when he's 12 in Luke because Luke wants to show you that he has this religious sensibility in the temple and is a teacher even from an early age. The rest of the stuff doesn't matter because it doesn't point to what they're trying to show you is that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the Kairos, He's Caesar, but the real one, and or the Kyrios, and he's trying to get you to follow him. That's what the evangelists are trying to do, trying to get you to follow Jesus. And they're only going to give you, and also, writing is really hard in the first century. It's really expensive and it's really hard. So you have to be very concise in what you say. So the story about the time on the construction site when he dropped the brick on Joseph's toe and everybody laughed and called him, brick dropper for the next 6 months, that's not important. Might have happened. And by the way, Jesus was not really a carpenter. The word tekton means more of a kind of construction worker, day laborer, that kind of thing. So he probably built all kinds of things. So that's why it's not included, not because it's not important. It's not included because they didn't have time and space and word processors and laser printers. And that wasn't the point of first century biography. What I would say is significant. The fact that it is included as much as it is shows us how important it is. The fact that they record Jesus weeping, the fact that they record Jesus, they give such detail of how he touched people when he healed them. He gives such detail into his emotional life when it talks about he was like moved deeply in his bowels. That kind of stuff is all included in there. He was anguished. He was sweating so much it was like blood. So all that humanity stuff that gets in there, the fact that it's in there when it was so hard to write and not usually what people wrote about, shows us how important it was. So that's how I would respond to that. It actually emphasizes it more than a lot of other books would. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's huge. Well, my fellow mitochondria, or do you want to say something? Okay. Fellow mitochondria holders, my little furnaces, human beings with the dust of the stars in your bones. Thanks for coming tonight. We invite you, as I said, next week to hear Michael Lloyd talk about two natures, something in a hovercraft. A boat, two natures, and a hovercraft, something like that. Anyways, we'll see you back next week. And you want to come up and talk a little bit? Don't get up. Rachel's going to do some closing stuff. And as she does, let me say a prayer. Dear God, thank you that you made stuff and that you made us and that you have redeemed all of it through your Son, Jesus Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen.
Just a couple things. Firstly, thank you for those who brought soup tonight. It was delicious. Thank you. And a reminder, we have 2 more nights and the sign-up board is out there. And if it fills up, you can email me and let me know so I don't get nervous, because I get nervous. If you would like to help clean up, there's a couple things. There's garbages on either side. If you have liquid still in your cup, if you could empty it in the kitchen. We've had some leaky bag situations that I'd like to avoid. If you would like to do more than that, you can carefully blow out the candle.